of the Village of Arlington Heights to order on Monday, June 15, 2020, and ask if you would all please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America
and
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. And would the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Tinaglia.
Here.
Trustee Scaletta.
Here.
Trustee Canty.
Here.
Trustee Rosenberg.
Here.
Trustee LaBedz.
Here.
Trustee Schwingbeck.
Here.
Trustee Baldino.
Here.
Trustee Padovani.
Here.
President Hayes.
Here. Just for the record, we are meeting virtually again this evening as a result of the COVID-19 Restore Illinois Phase 3 restrictions. It's not practical or prudent that we meet yet in person due to the gathering and size limit restrictions. And so we are meeting virtually again this evening. We expect that we may go to a fully in-person meeting in July, but we'll iron out the details and make sure that's publicized to the community as soon as possible. So we will move on in the agenda to the approval of minutes. And the first and only set of minutes we have to approve tonight is from the Village Board meeting of June 1st, 2020. Are there any changes or passes?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion to approve by Trustee Rosenberg. I think the second was Trustee Baldino. Roll call.
Trustee Rosenberg.
Yes.
Trustee Baldino.
Yes.
Trustee Padovani.
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz.
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia.
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck.
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta.
Yes.
Trustee Canty.
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the warrant register. And I call on Trustee Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mayor Hayes. I'd move approval of the warrant register with a check date of June 15, 2020 in the amount of $2,156,956.99.
Second.
A motion by Trustee Rosenberg, second by Trustee Scaletta. Any questions or comments from the board? Anything from the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Rosenberg.
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta.
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz.
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck.
Yes.
Trustee Padovani.
Yes.
Trustee Baldino.
Yes.
Trustee Canty.
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia.
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. Well, before we move on to recognitions and presentations, I would like to ask for a motion to move up the report out of the earlier committee, the whole meeting, approval of 2 board and commission candidates to this point in the agenda for that motion, and then they're swearing in. So if I could have a motion to move up old business items B and C to this point in the agenda.
So moved.
Second. Second.
By Trustee Tinaglia and seconded by Trustee Schwingbeck. Roll call.
Trustee Tinaglia.
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck.
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz.
Yes.
Trustee Canty.
Yes.
Trustee Padovani.
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg.
Yes.
Trustee Baldino.
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta.
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. Well, the first item to report out was the approval of Timothy Carter for appointment to the Senior Citizens Commission. And so I call on the motion maker, Trustee Tinaglia.
Actually, I was for Chris.
Trustee Baldino, Mayor.
Yes.
I got him mixed up. Trustee Baldino, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. I would move at this time to concur with the mayor's appointment of Timothy Carter to the Senior Citizens Commission with a term ending April 30th, 2023.
Second.
Motion by trustee Baldino, seconded by trustee Schwingbeck. Any questions or comments from the board? Anything from the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Baldino,
Yes.
trustee Schwingbeck,
Yes.
trustee Scaletta,
Yes.
trustee Padovani,
Yes.
trustee Rosenberg,
Yes.
trustee Canty,
Yes.
trustee Tinaglia,
Yes.
trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. Well, Tim Carter, are you there? Tim, there you are.
Hello.
Hi, Tim. We got your audio.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Have you got video capability?
It just asked me to unmute. It didn't ask me for video.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and do this by audio. And so I'm going to trust that you're raising your right hand. We're
Yeah.
going to swear you in at this point. And so if you raise your right hand and repeat after me, I, and state your full name,
I, Timothy Carter,
having been appointed to the office of member of the Senior Citizens Commission
having been appointed to the office of the Senior Citizen Commission
in the village of Arlington Heights,
in the village of Arlington Heights,
in the county of Cook,
in the county of Cook,
do solemnly swear and affirm
do solemnly affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the state of Illinois,
and the state of Illinois,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
of the office according to the best of my ability.
of the office according to the best of my abilities.
Well, congratulations, Tim. We know you will.
Thank
There's
you very
one other
much.
thing there's one other thing you have to do, but we can't do it virtually, and that's sign your oath of office with the village clerk. And so we'll get that done at your first meeting, probably with the Senior Citizens Commission. So welcome as an official representative of this board, and we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor Hayes and the board.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
You.
Now I would call on trustee Tinaglia for reporting out the next motion.
Thanks, Mayor Hayes. I'd like to move now, as I did earlier tonight, in the concurrence with your appointment of Dr. Kristen Brown to the Board of Health, the term ending of April 30th, 2021.
Second.
Motion by trustee Tinaglia, seconded by trustee Canty. Any further questions or comments from the board? Anything from the audience? Seeing none. Dr. Brown, are you there?
Can you hear me?
We got you.
Okay.
All right. If you would raise your right hand as well and repeat after me. I, and state your full name,
I, Kristen Brown,
having been appointed to the office of member of the Board of Health
having been appointed to the office of member of the Board of Health
in the village of Arlington Heights
in the village of Arlington Heights
and the county of Cook,
and the county of Cook,
do solemnly swear and affirm
do solemnly swear and affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the state of Illinois,
and the state of Illinois,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
of the office according to the best of my ability.
of the office according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations, Dr. Brown. We know you will as well. And we'll make sure that you sign your oath at some point in the near future as well. So we wish you the best of luck as a representative of this village board. Thank you for serving.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to the board.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Becky had,
Excuse me, Mayor. We need to do a roll call on that motion.
Oh, I'm sorry, Becky.
It's okay.
Go ahead, roll call.
Trustee Tinaglia,
Yes.
trustee Canty,
yes.
trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
trustee Rosenberg,
Yes.
trustee Scaletta,
Yes.
trustee Baldino,
Yes.
trustee Padovani,
Yes.
trustee Schwingbeck,
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. All right, now, Dr. Brown, you're official.
Okay, thank you.
Congratulations again.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move back in the agenda then to recognitions and presentations. And before we introduce the village manager and police chief for a presentation on policing, diversity, and inclusion in Arlington Heights, let me just say a few words. At our last virtual village board meeting 2 weeks ago, I expressed anger and sadness over the events that had transpired the week and weekend before. Clearly, we are all subject to and tested by various trials over the course of our lifetimes. One true measure of a person or an organization's character is how they deal with those trials. And so tonight, I want to thank all those in Arlington Heights who've demonstrated respect for their fellow citizens by protesting and requesting change in a peaceful and respectful manner. So rather than anger and sadness, tonight I want to express hope. As it says in the book of Romans, we should glory in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance character, and character hope. We've got a lot to be thankful for here in the village of Arlington Heights, a village that has been voted the best place to live in the Daily Herald readership for the last 2 consecutive years. And among the reasons why we have been voted such are the residents and businesses that contribute so much to our community and who complied so voluntarily with the stay-at-home orders and the Restore Illinois plan. And so we thank all of our residents and businesses for getting to us at this point in phase 3 with the hope of getting to phase 4 yet next week, next Friday, June 26th, if all the numbers stay where they're at. And also a big part of the state of our village and the quality of life we enjoy here in Arlington Heights is our police department, which I believe is second to none. One that has a stellar reputation within the community and one that has contributed greatly to our rating as one of the safest communities of our size anywhere in the United States of America. Having said that, we can always do things better. And we are constantly looking for ways to improve, not only in our police department, but throughout all levels of village operations. And so tonight, we do want to have a presentation by both our village manager and our police chief, Nick Pecora, to address some of the issues and things that we've been doing over the course of the last few weeks as a result of recent events. And so I would like to turn it over to our village manager now, Randy Recklaus. Randy?
Thank you, Mayor. Let me just share my screen here. Okay. As mentioned at our last meeting, village staff shares the sense of outrage felt all over the country over recent events involving police officers committing acts of violence against those they are sworn to protect. In addition, there's a national dialogue now underway about what the best practices should be in law enforcement, with a greater emphasis on social services and wraparound services versus traditional enforcement activities. Understandably, in recent days, we've received a number of requests from residents about what kind of policies and practices our own police department has in place. Chief Pecora tonight is prepared to review the Arlington Heights Police Department's current policies, training, and practices in both of these critical areas. And on a related note, I wanted to highlight a couple of our efforts currently planned and underway in the area of community and organizational diversity and inclusion. So with that, I will let Chief Pecora kick things off, and Chief, I'll advance these slides for you.
Thank you, Mr. Recklaus. And Mayor, good evening. Members of the board, good evening. Mayor, thank you for those kind words with respect to the police department. It's my privilege to be here this evening to talk about a couple of points as it relates to the police department and how we hold ourselves to a higher standard and how we get there. The police department is a nationally accredited law enforcement agency. The Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agency is that accrediting body. It's a national board comprised of 21 commissioners. It's been around for 40 years. The commissioners rotate on 3-year increments. They include police chiefs, a senator, city managers, judge, and professors, to name a couple of the occupations or professions. The purpose of CALIA accreditation is to establish a foundation within public safety agencies that focuses on achieving the best outcomes in the delivery of services. Consistent internal and external review combined with third-party validation. I'm going to stress that third-party validation, and I'll make the connection in a later slide, of an agency's policies and procedures is critical in the delivery of high-quality public safety services and promotes accountability. Arlington Heights first received accreditation in 2008, and we received 3 consecutive reaccreditations in 2011, 2014, and 2017. It was, at the initial stages, a 3-year cycle, and in 2017, they went to a 4-year cycle. So we are next up for reaccreditation in 2021. It's not a cheap endeavor. It cost us $12,000 to get accredited, and it's $4,000 each year because of the effort that the commission puts into reviewing our policies. And on the assessment years, there's an additional fee for the on-site personnel, their per diem. CALIA has 800 member agencies. There's 18,000 law enforcement agencies. So we are one of roughly 4.5% of the active law enforcement agencies that can call ourselves accredited. A department is required to address national standards through best practice policies and subsequent documentations that's reviewed by independent assessors every year, and required to host more thorough on-site assessment every 4 years. CALIA has 480 standards that we have to meet, and each standard has multiple substandards. So if you do the math, that's several thousand proofs that we have to comply with each year to successfully move on as a reaccredited agency. On-site reviews involve interviews with police staff, village leadership, and creates opportunities for members of the public to share their views regarding their interaction with the police department. On-site assessors compile all information and feedback and produce a report that's used for consideration for the commission to vote on the department's receiving another reaccreditation award. Next slide, please. Response to resistance, and let me first introduce the subject. A couple of years ago, there was a trend in policing to get away from the word or the title use of force and call it what it is. It's a response to resistance. So for those people that are interested in our use of force policy, we call it response to resistance. And here is an overview. The department has multiple policies that direct officers on how and when to respond to resistance. Policies are reviewed at least annually and determined if there are opportunities to enhance the policy based on recognized best practices. Current response to resistance policies meet all CALIA-related standards. The department conducts an investigation on all incidents where force is applied or if there is a complaint made by the public. An annual analysis is conducted on all response to resistance-related incidents and determine if there are any patterns or if there are any training deficiencies. And it also would address a policy failure if that existed. Emphasis is placed on de-escalation techniques in order to minimize any potential injury or response with lethal force, as the department values the preservation of all human life. Recently added language regarding the duty to intervene in order to prevent any potential use of force was added this morning after a suggestion made by a member of the public, and I'll address that later on. Our training program is robust. That plan takes into account mandatory training based on state statute, adhering to best practices in policing. Training personnel for potential leadership is one of our issues to make sure that we adhere to best policy and we have leadership for the next generation. The department invested in a virtual simulator. It's a very comprehensive training tool that's in our basement. It's a $200,000 investment paid for with our asset forfeiture dollars. So we were taking funds that were derived from criminal enterprise and put it into police training. It's a judgmental use of force and decision-making trainer simulator designed to teach, test, and sustain officers' knowledge and skills. The department is only one of 3 agencies in the northern part of the state that has one of these virtual trainers. In 2019, officers attended 1,743 training classes, which accounts to approximately 6,000 hours of instruction. The Illinois Law Enforcement Training Standards Board, or ILETSB, or the Training Board as they're referred to, is a state agency that it's mandated to promote and maintain a high level of professional standard for law enforcement. That's the agency that certifies police officers in Illinois, and they're the ones that oversee most training classes that we attend, including the Police Academy. In addition to going to training classes, officers conduct online training in their non-patrol time. And some of those topics that are taught online are cultural competency, human rights, legal updates, procedural justice, civil rights, constitutional and proper use of authority, and response to resistance. Some of our public safety policies, partnerships that kind of take the outside the box approach are the VOCA program. And the VOCA program is the Victim of Crime Act, and it's a federal act that mandates the assistance given to victims of crime. In 2003, we received our first grant through the VOCA program, and we were able to hire a victim services coordinator. She's a licensed clinical professional counselor who interacts with people who report crimes, and we assist the person through the criminal proceeding as a victim advocate. The International Association of Chiefs of Police has a One Mind campaign. It's a 4-pillar campaign that is designed to teach the officers how to react when interacting with someone that has mental health. The 4 pillars include 20% of the department's sworn personnel should be trained in crisis intervention team training. And that's a very comprehensive school that teaches the officer about de-escalation when somebody may be in a manic episode, and how to deal with that person to de-escalate and then determine the best course of action for them, whether it's turning them over to the fire department for treatment at a medical facility or introducing them into some social services position. Mental health first aid is another pillar. We have 2 officers that are certified instructors who have taught the program to every one of our sworn and non-sworn employees. Another pillar is a partnership with a mental health provider. We are fortunate to have Alexian Brothers Mental Health on North Kennecott as our partner in this program. And the last pillar is you have to have a comprehensive policy. So we met the 4 pillars of the One Mind campaign, and that's how we deal with people that are in crisis. The Northern Illinois Benchmarking Cooperative is a cooperative of Northern Illinois municipalities, and it involves police chiefs, fire chiefs, and village managers. And it's going through the data to try and figure out what's the best approach for a particular issue that's a front burner topic. And one that we recently went through kind of dovetails with One Mind campaign. We dealt with how best to deal with mental health calls. And
I think you're muted, Chief. You go on the lower left-hand corner, there should be a microphone.
sorry, my screen went blank. Okay, can you hear me now?
We got you.
Okay, thank you. And then the last issue on this slide is the community addiction recovery effort, or the CARE program. And this program is a multidisciplinary approach by the Village of Arlington Heights in concert with some of our key partners in the community. And it was formed to address the opioid crisis. The health department, the fire department, the police department, in concert with Northwest Community Hospital, Live for Lolly, Omni, and other providers operate under a grant that's managed by the police department to help people that are in substance abuse crisis. And next slide, please. As was mentioned earlier, there have been a number of emails that have been sent to the mayor, members of the board, the manager, and myself. And on this slide, I kind of paraphrased or condensed what I felt were the most received concerns. And I want to address those individually in an expedited manner. A ban on chokeholds and strangleholds. I've been a police officer in Arlington Heights for 34 years. I was never taught how to use a chokehold as an arrest control technique. In August of 2015, the state of Illinois passed a piece of legislation prohibiting chokeholds by law enforcement. Governor Rauner signed that in the fall of 2015. And in 2016, the Arlington Heights Police Department incorporated it in our use of force, our response to resistance protocol, that chokeholds and strangleholds are not prohibited unless it's a lethal force situation.
Chief, you said.
You mean prohibited?
Not prohibited. They are prohibited, right?
They are, that's correct. They are prohibited. Yeah, there are some caveats in there. Again, like I said, if it's a lethal force situation, if it's lethal force, anything goes.
You want to clarify what lethal force means? I'm sorry, Chief.
Certainly. So if an officer determines from a reasonable person's perspective that his life, the life of another person is in grave danger, then lethal force may be applied, and that may be taking a human life. And again, another caveat with the chokehold or the stranglehold is an officer could certainly put their hands on someone's neck if they roll up to an accident scene and the person may be suffering from what an officer may think is a cervical injury, and to stabilize the person so they don't suffer additional injury before the paramedics get there and apply a C-collar. So, it's written into the policy that there are exceptions to that, but from an arrest control perspective, we do not use chokeholds. They are prohibited. Require de-escalation. It's in our response to resistance. De-escalation is the first level of the use of force continuum, and it's always better to get compliance through verbal persuasion and de-escalation. So that is in our response to resistance policy. Require a warning before shooting. We have in our response to resistance policy that when feasible, an officer will provide a warning that is in concert with our practice, and that is police stop. And there are exceptions to most of these caveats, or there are caveats to most of these issues where if an officer determines that there's an immediate danger and you do not have ample time to issue a warning, there's an exception for that. But in most situations, a warning will be issued. Exhaust all other means before shooting. That kind of dovetails into all of this. And of course, an officer is going to exhaust all reasonable means before resolving an issue with lethal force. Duty to intervene. This was interesting, and it made me reflect. Again, I thought by inference or by reference that we addressed this issue. But as I went through the applicable orders, I saw that we had a duty to report, but it was not black and white on a duty to intervene. And as we all saw in Minneapolis, if there was a duty to intervene, it's clear to the officers now that we have an order to intervene. And that duty to intervene is placed in the response to resistance, as well as the department's rule of conduct. So it is in our prevailing general orders in two different orders in two different categories. So that was something that I adopted based on the suggestions forwarded to me by the community. Ban shooting at moving vehicles. We do ban shooting at moving vehicles. Again, there's caveats. If the officer is pinned against the wall, if you will, and the vehicle is being used as a weapon, the officer can use lethal force to defend himself or somebody else. But as a general rule, we do not shoot at moving vehicles, whether approaching or fleeing. Establish a use of force continuum. In our response to resistance order, there is a use of force continuum, and it's in narrative form, and it starts out with verbal compliance, and it moves to intermediary weapons, and that could be pepper spray or a taser, and it moves on to impact weapons, which could be a baton or less lethal munition, and it finalizes with lethal force. And then the last in that side of the equation is require comprehensive reporting. We do have comprehensive reporting, and again, it's in our response to resistance, that if an officer uses a control technique, certainly a taser, and somebody was injured or just the taser itself, the officer needs to immediately notify the supervisor. The on-duty supervisor conducts an independent and comprehensive review of the situation to make sure that the application of force was proportionate and appropriate. And then moving to the right side of the slide, information posted on village website dealing current police practices. I have that under review right now, and as of this afternoon, I posted the response to resistance and the high-level response to resistance general orders on our page of the village's website. I'm going to take a look at the rest of the 200 general orders, and those that don't have confidentiality or operational integrity, I'd be more than happy to share in a public forum. But something that would interfere with the integrity of a mission, like dignitary protection, I don't feel sharing that is appropriate, because it would be like the manager of a professional sport team sharing the game day strategy. So I'm going to take each general order on a case-by-case basis and see if it's worth sharing. Independent expert perform an audit on current department practices as compared to best practice. And this is where I said on the first slide, I'd tie it in. And this is where CALEA comes into play. You know, we are a nationally accredited law enforcement agency, and we do have an audit component where assessors from outside agencies come in and take a look at our agency. They prepare a comprehensive report, and if there's a deficiency, it's noted in the report. And if there's a glaring deficiency, if we go before the commission for reaccreditation, they're going to deny our reaccreditation. And so far, knock on wood, we have not been denied reaccreditation since 2008. Create a strategic roadmap committee to address any shortcomings found in the independent audit. Well, I don't have to address that because our audit has not identified any shortcomings. And then the last on this page is ensure discussion of progress and setbacks related to changes in police policies are regular topics during village board meetings and provide updates on the village website. I'd be happy to provide updates as needed, Mayor. I don't control the village board agenda, so if you would like me to come back at any time and address the board on any concern, I would be more than happy to do so. And my last slide, the immediate future moving forward, the department will continue to be responsive to the public and the village's needs. We are currently working to move some of our already publicly accessible documents that are posted on at the police station to the village's website, so others can see those and not just the visitors to the police station. And we will continue to monitor and make necessary changes based on legislative updates from either Congress or the state's General Assembly. And as I commented in an article that was published in yesterday's newspaper, what I don't want to do is make changes now and then have either a state or federal mandate come out and say, this is what police reform is going to be like. And then I'm going to have to retrain and retool the organization. So I don't want to sit back and wait. But you know, as the president mentioned at his news conference this afternoon, he's going to come out with some talking points tomorrow on police reform. So I look forward to what the president has to say, and I will move the police department forward based on his recommendations or those that come out from a state mandate. And that concludes my presentation, Mr. Recklos.
Thank you, Chief. And you know, to dovetail with that, obviously, just like the discussion of best practices in law enforcement, Events of the past few weeks have brought the topic of racism and inclusion into focus as well. The village is committed to be both a welcoming and an inclusive community. And we've set out to take action in this area. So I wanted to highlight a couple of the village's current activities. Last year, the village board adopted a new set of strategic priorities for the years 2020 to 2021. These represent the village board's view of the most pressing current areas of focus for our community. One of these items relates to diversity and inclusion. Village staff finalized a business plan of specific projects and activities to support each of the strategic priorities in December of 2019. That plan includes tasks to be completed during this time frame to support each priority. It includes assignment of each task to individual staff members and deadlines. I wanted to highlight just a couple of those new and ongoing projects related to diversity and inclusion this evening. The Arlington Heights Village staff organized and has led a Northwest Suburban Minority Law Enforcement Recruitment Work Group with 6 neighboring communities since 2018. We have jointly discussed best practices in minority recruitment and retention, and even planned an event that was to take place this past March at Harper College with the goal of breaking down some of the traditional barriers present for minority and other non-traditional candidates seeking careers in law enforcement. We also hope to build networking relationship with the attendees that could turn into internships and future employment. The event unfortunately was canceled due to the COVID-19 pandemic. It will be rescheduled once things open up again. The village also routinely advertises in minority employment publications and had planned on attending a diversity career fair this April, also canceled, but we'll attend another one this September if it is held. In recent years, the police department has sent recruitment teams to city colleges where the demographics differ from our own community in an attempt to increase the number of minority applicants. We've also begun to network with outside organizations that can help us with the goal of diversifying the candidate pool for our open positions. This year's plan also calls for the village government to undergo a diversity and inclusion policy and practice audit and the development of a new diversity and inclusion plan and policy. This audit is planned to be completed in the 4th quarter of 2020. That was in the business plan that was issued end of last year, with the policy and plan to be completed by the 2nd quarter of 2021. As part of our audit process, our HR department is organizing forums for village staff to talk about their perceptions of the inclusiveness of our organization and how we can improve. These will occur in the 3rd quarter of this year. Upper management from every department underwent unconscious bias training last year, and additional employees will undergo training by the end of 2020. But despite these efforts, we know that being an inclusive organization and community will take continual work and discussion, and we don't have all the answers. In the spirit of that, the village is currently planning a virtual community discussion meeting on how to increase inclusion and embrace diversity within our community. School District 25, the Park District, and Arlington Heights Memorial Library have already indicated that they're interested in participating in this event as well. This meeting will not only be an opportunity for the community agencies to talk about their efforts in those areas, but also to listen to residents about their experiences, ideas, and needs on these topics. We'll be doing more work and putting more information out on this event over the next few weeks, so stay tuned. But with that, we'd be happy to entertain any questions that anyone may have.
Well, thanks, Randy and Chief Pecora for very informative presentations. Chief, I especially liked the addressing the community concerns, and I think that's most topical at this point, and I think you did a great job of summarizing and addressing where the village of Arlington Heights is with respect to those concerns that have been expressed by our residents. So with that, I'll turn it over to the board for questions. Trustee Padovani.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to let everybody know that you can actually have even a closer look at our police department and all the things that go on in Arlington Heights by attending the Citizens Police Academy, which I did, oh gosh, too many years ago. But It's a 9-week course, 3 hours a week, where you basically learn what each of the divisions or functions of the police department does. You'll sit in the 911 call center and listen to those operators take those emergency calls, not only for our town, but for the other, I think it's 12 different suburbs, but it's here in Arlington Heights, and it's just incredible what those people do and how they have to triage important emergency situations. But every night is a real revelation on how the police work, how professional they are, and the many, many different things they encounter in our town. But it all culminates in an opportunity to ride along with a police officer during their shift. And I took actually advantage of that. I rode along for 12 hours with 2 different officers. And in that time, there were 4 major incidents here. It was a Friday afternoon into the evening. And in those 4 major incidents, I saw the continuum used in which the police officers in 2 domestic situations, which were very, very emotional, they used their words, they used their de-escalation training, and they calmed a situation down that could have very well gone violent. And then in 2 separate other situations, I saw that exact same behavior by a second officer, in which their training, which impressed me as being exceptionally professional, it really came out, and it really made me think that we've got some real pros out there protecting our safety, and always, always trying to use words and de-escalate and try to understand people in everything that they do, in every contact that they have. So I can't say enough good things about my experiences with the police force and my direct observations through the Citizens Police Academy about what they're doing. And I highly recommend it for any citizen. Chief, I believe it's spring, and when COVID restrictions are not in place, there's a class in the spring and there's a class in the fall that's given, and it's posted on the website. I believe that's the case.
Yes, sir, you are correct.
But that's just what I'd like to recommend, Mr. Mayor, to everybody in Arlington Heights who would like to learn more about what our excellent police force does here in Arlington Heights. Thank you.
Thanks, Trustee Padovani. Trustee Canty.
So first, I want to thank you, Chief Pecora, for your presentation. Like Trustee Padovani, I also went through the Citizens Police Academy, and I will be honest, I was skeptical based on experiences that members of my family have had with law enforcement, based on the fact that, you know, we are people of color and we present in certain ways. And it was very eye-opening and refreshing to see the level of training that our officers undergo here in terms of de-escalation techniques, et cetera. So I would love an opportunity for you to talk more with members of the public about what that is and provide some examples. This is probably not the best forum to do that, but I do think that's something that we should be proud of and highlighting. And I would not have known had I not had the opportunity to go through the Citizens Police Academy. So I would second what Trustee Padovani has said and ask that people go through that as much as they are able. Randy, thank you for your presentation as well. I'm sure you can guess where I'm going to go next. From a hiring perspective and a diversity policy perspective, in terms of implementing one for the village, where do we sit more broadly, looking at our overall staff, not just our police department, but kind of generally speaking, where do we sit in getting a formal policy in place?
That's kind of the process we're looking at. Is we want to do diagnosis before prescription. And so we want to engage the community coming up in the next several weeks. And then we also want to hear from our staff about where they think our strengths and weaknesses are, and then do kind of an overall assessment and use that to really form what this policy and plan should be. But we in terms of, you know, law enforcement, we've been talking about best practices just to try to get more candidates to apply for these positions. And, you know, that's the challenge that we are facing right now is we just generally are not seeing candidates, as many minority candidates as we'd like to see. And so we're trying to network with folks, talk to people, get the word out there that Arlington Heights is looking for more diversity in candidates for employment. And so, any way we can spread the word, we're happy to do that. And we're looking for more partners along the way.
Yeah, I think that all sounds good, and I'm glad that we're going to move that forward. I think being able to hold up our department and its training as an exemplar might be a good way to try and attract some additional candidates. They can be part of changing what policing looks like in the US, and I think that's something that we should be proud of.
Thanks, Trustee Canty. Trustee Tinaglia.
Thanks, Mayor Hayes. Well, Chief, I can't imagine a more difficult profession than what you are doing right now, and all the men and women in blue across the country. You have to be excellent all the time with very difficult situations that could be very frightening. At the same time, you have to be so tender and so careful in all the right ways to protect everyone on both sides of the equation. So I want to compliment you and thank you. I've met and known a number of Arlington Heights police officers, and I know they all have a lot of respect for you, as you do of all of them. And I'm just thankful for what we have here right now, a group of individuals that have, I believe, the right direction in every respect. I have a couple of quick questions. How many officers, for everyone's sake, how many officers do we have out in the field right now?
Let me give you the overview. By ordinance, we're allowed 109. We currently staff the department with 104. And on any given shift, there's between 8 and 15 officers on patrol. And then you have supervisors. And during the day, you certainly have the administrative staff, the traffic unit, our detectives. So at any given time, you could have a cadre of 35, 40 uniformed and non-uniformed people to address an issue in town.
Okay. So you said 109 is our staff, if it was fully staffed, but we're at about 104?
Correct.
Okay. How long would you say that we've been 5 short, let's say?
There's an ebb and flow with that. As retirements come, we try and fill them. We do try and fill them with the best candidate moving forward off the eligibility list, whether it's the entry level or the certified candidate level. The certified candidate is a little bit easier because they don't have to go to the academy. If we hire somebody off the entry level, it's 14 weeks in the academy and 15 weeks in the field training program. So it's 6 months before he or she is what we call certified for solo patrol.
It's almost like you read my mind. My next question was going to be, how long does it take to get someone up and running in the department and being productive and trained the way you want them to be trained? Would you say it's 6 months then, or is it longer?
Well, the new hires, 18 months probation. If you're a new hire, if you come with experience, you're on probation for a year. And we've had some certified candidates, the last couple that were hired came from Chicago, and they assimilated very easily into our organization. I kind of refer to it as a 26th district because we have about 15 officers that have come from Chicago, and they do their own recruiting. So it's nice that you have somebody that comes with experience. You don't have to pay for them to go to the academy salary while they're in the academy for 14 weeks, and they become productive members of the patrol division much quicker.
If I can jump in too, Trustee Tinaglia and Chief, just to give Chief credit and the organization credit, not everyone makes it out of that field training program. And, in recent memory, we've had officers that, may have been great people. They may end up having, a good career ahead of them in law enforcement, but we've determined that they weren't a good fit for our organization because we have very high standards. And, that's one of the challenges, is that we invest a lot in these folks as part of the training, but at the same time, at the end of the day, we only accept the ones that we think are going to be a best fit for this organization, for this community.
Well, and thank you for saying that. I couldn't agree more. There's probably just a litany of requirements that you have to go through to get to the level that we require here. And I just thank you for working so hard at getting it done. And we're 5 short based on ordinance right now. I've been on this board for 7 years, and it seems like the entire time I've been on, we've never had the whole 109 on there. I could be wrong about that, but it's not easy. I mean, would you agree it's not easy to be full capacity? Is that correct?
You're correct. You know, people retire, they hit benchmarks, whether it's 20 or 30 years, or move on for one reason or another. And as we've said, we only accept the top-notch people, and there's a rigorous pre-screening process that they need to go through, and some don't make the cut, and it's difficult to get them through the process. And then you have to line up the hire with the academy date, because you don't want somebody sitting around on the payroll that is not a productive member of the force.
Sure, that makes sense. Well, I'll wrap up here. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Randy, for doing such a great job and trying to be so proactive in all of these respects. The community appreciates it. I know the entire country is watching always. I don't care how big your community is. Ours is 75,000. I don't know how that fits in all across the country, but you know, compared to Minnesota or Minneapolis or New York or Chicago, but I can imagine that one bad thing that goes wrong, you're in the spotlight. And certainly none of us on this program here tonight want anything to do with that. And I think we're in wonderful hands with you. So please keep your chin up. I know it's tough. I open with, I'll close it. Your profession has got to be the most difficult profession on the planet right now. But thank God for all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Trustee Tinaglia. Any other questions? Trustee LaBedz.
Thank you, Mayor Hayes. I also want to thank you, Manager Recklaus and Chief Pecora, for the presentation that you gave. I knew from my personal experience at Citizens Police Academy, as well as one-on-one conversations with you both, that many of the concerns being raised by the public lately are things that this village is already working on, concentrating on, striving to improve. And as you both said, you know, there's always room for improvement, and we're continuing to make that progress. As Trustees Canty and Padovani said, I also highly recommend to our residents taking the opportunity to go through the Citizens Police Academy. I think it's 12 weeks now, if I recall correctly.
I think that's right.
Yeah, and I didn't know what I didn't know about policing and our police force, and the vast amount of things that you deal with on a regular basis. So I think it's really really an excellent program, and thank you for putting it on, and the officers that present the various segments are just top notch. The one thing I still need to do is my ride along, even though I was the last class in the old building. Just for some reason, I haven't gotten my act together. But once this COVID stuff is over, it's time to do that ride along. So thank you both.
Thank you.
I look forward to more as things go on, as well as the community discussion, Randy, that you're working with the other taxing bodies on. So thank you for that too.
Thank you, Trustee LaBedz. Trustee Scaletta.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chief, for your presentation this evening. Can you tell us a little bit about the Virtuous Simulator? Is that something that also shows race when they're going through the simulator?
The scenarios that are produced by the Virtuous company they're dynamic. They have multiple segues. So the facilitator, the instructor, can put a scenario up there. Let's say it's an active shooter at a school, and you or a partner officer step into the screen. It's a 5-dimension screen, and the scenario starts, and the person comes out, and you're approached by an animated person, and it's a shoot, don't shoot, because you're going to an active shooter, and you're amped up as you get in and immersed into the scenario. And there are all sorts of different, there's a spectrum of actors that Virtua uses. And it teaches you to take a look at the person, take a look at the threat they present, and do you pull the trigger or don't you pull the trigger? And those are the lethal force scenarios. There's also domestic situations where if you employ de-escalation, the facilitator can say, oh, he's working this pretty good. I'm going to make the scenario segue to solution through de-escalation rather than a tactical approach, whether it's lethal or non-lethal force. So it's a great tool. It has many different scenarios, many different segues. Each scenario can be concluded. It's a great training tool.
Yes, thank you. And I'm glad you explained it a little bit more. I mean, as a board, we've had an opportunity to see it in action, and it's very realistic. And it's amazing how you can change the scenarios, and it's it's like virtual reality with somebody at the helm, kind of guiding the officer through. And I think that it's a great tool that we have. I also wanted to commend you. I know that some of the community, and I'm not one of them, but have questioned, why the police are working with the protesters. First of all, I'm saddened and I'm angered by the murder of George Floyd. But I think it's important for people to have the right to express their freedom of speech and protest. And I think that, the police department should be commended for, working with the organizers of these protests to give them the ability to protest and have their routes all figured out so that they can protest peacefully. And I think that, some police departments, come in fatigues and battle gear, and that's not the way that you guys approach this. And I think you have to be commended for that, because it's important that people have that opportunity. I was able to walk through the streets of downtown Arlington Heights. There were people that were cheering the protesters on. And I think that when you see that most people in this community are against racism, especially systemic racism that goes on, that it shows that, that the community is supportive of ending it, and they won't, it's not going to happen in this town, and they're going to hold our police department to a high standard, which we've always held you to. But this is an important time for you and your deputy chiefs to continue to identify opportunities, for training and learning and reinforcing the policies that we have in place, and looking at whether or not we need to adopt new training techniques to make sure that we live up to the standard in this village. So thank you, Chief. And I did go to Citizen Police Academy. I did enjoy it. It was 11 weeks. I did it with my wife. And it's great because every week, aside from it being a different topic, you have different officers coming in to present. And so you see a different perspective from a lot of different people. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Trustee Scaletta. Anything else from the board? Seeing none, I am Trustee Baldino. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm sorry, I was a little slow getting my hand up. I'm not usually one to repeat things that we've already heard, but I feel that this is important. I am sympathetic to some of the concerns that are coming out of the community. But I was anxious tonight to hear the report of Chief Pecora and Manager Recklos, because I knew that our outstanding police department was already addressing many of the concerns that were being voiced. And I was very grateful to hear Chief Pecora confirm what I already knew as a graduate of the Citizens Police Academy also. So thank you, Chief, for your response tonight, for all the hard work that you and in the entire police department does. And thank you, Manager Recklos, for also addressing some of the wider concerns with the village and the village staff. That's all I had. I just wanted to make sure that I gave my full-throated support for our police department, as well as my sympathy for the concerns that some of our citizens have been raising. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Trustee Baldino. If nothing else from the board, I do want to, Trustee Rosenberg, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I might as well be also one to pipe in. Chief, you do a great job and appreciate all the efforts that you've gone through and all the attention I think every police department has received in the last many weeks as far as with everything going on, and appreciate, you know, your forthrightness with coming forth with all the issues and addressing them. And, you know, I think we can do, you know, nothing but improve upon what we're doing and, you know, hope for the best with everything that we're doing, and appreciate all the efforts that all the officers and staff and the command staff are doing, and your work, and Manager Recklaus also, and, you know, coming to terms with all these issues and things like that and trying to address them, because I think that's what the people are looking for. And, you know, there are people that are looking for extremes to be done and measures taken, but I think what we're doing right now is the right way to go and continue on the path that we're taking. So thanks again, and thank all your officers for everything they do.
Thank you.
Thanks, Trustee Rosenberg. Now, let me turn to the audience to see if there's any questions or comments from members of the audience on this agenda item. We do have citizens to be heard next, and so you will have another opportunity to address the board on an item not on the agenda at that time. So seeing none, I will again thank both.
I think we have, sorry to interrupt, I think we do have a few hands up.
I'm not seeing them.
We go under attendees.
There we go. Okay, I see them. All right, let me start then by just giving some general guidance. We would like to limit your participation to 3 minutes, and I will be monitoring the clock here. And so we do have other items on the agenda this evening, and they've been waiting patiently. So we just want to make sure that we use our time wisely, but we don't want to stifle any comments either. So with that, I will first call on Bill Davis.
Thank you. Appreciate that. My questions are twofold. One, what is the diversity makeup of our police department? We have 104 officers there, and how does that break down? And then secondly, was wondering what the diversity is within Arlington Heights city government. Do we have diverse people working? Do we hire? Do we have hiring practices that allow diverse people to join our community?
Chief, why don't you address the makeup of the police department, if you would?
Certainly. Thank you, Mayor. I do not have the demographics of the workforce, Manager Reckless. I don't know if you have them in front of you.
I do have some of the data, you know, if you bear with me on it. You know, on the police side, I mean, we have the way to look at this is, you know, in terms of the community demographic, about 1.5% of the population of Arlington Heights is Black or African American, 10% is Asian, 5.6% is Latino, 1.7% is 2 or more races, and roughly 84% are white. In terms of police protection, we have out of, let me just look at the total, and I apologize, I don't have all the percentages, but we have I think it's about 130 staff. 100, yeah, in terms of, you have 132, I think, that are listed on here. This is according to EEOC, of our employees in the police department. We have roughly 8 are Hispanic. We have, let's see, 2 are 2 or more races. We have one employee that is Black or African American. I'm sorry, we have 11 total Hispanic because there's male and female. So it's not, it's, you know, African American and Asian is definitely, they're a hair lower than the population as a whole, particularly Asian, but it's similar to the population at large. For employees overall, I think it's just under 1% of our village employees out of 430 some staff are African American. And again, it's a 1.5% of the population is African American. I don't have the rest of the stats in front of me, but we certainly invite people of color and people of different backgrounds to join our team. Personally, and this is something I've shared with the management team as village manager, I think the community and the organization benefits from having people who don't all share the same background and the same perspective. Because I think very often people who have all the same background and the same perspective share the same blind spots. And so I think we benefit from people having different backgrounds and looking at problems and situations differently. And we want a organization that's reflective of the community we serve. And so, we certainly encourage candidates of, from, all different backgrounds and races and genders and so forth to join our organization. And sometimes it's just a challenge to find the right candidates.
Well, thanks, Randy. In terms of the elected representatives in town, certainly the only requirements are that you be 18 years old and a resident of Arlington Heights, at least to run for the village board. And so no limitations, and there is a municipal election next year in April. And so any and all are welcome to run for position on the village board or any of our other elected offices in town, the school boards, the library board, the park boards, the townships, and anybody who wants to serve. And so we are welcoming in that respect. So hopefully that answers your question, Mr. Davis.
Thank you.
All right. Next, I'll call on Janet or John Borick.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
We got you.
Thank you. Appreciate the report that the chief and also the administrator are giving. And I really support the work that you're doing for the future, especially the unconscious, unbiased training that you'll be doing later this year. I hope that, will that be required for all the police officers?
We're still working through the formatting for that. I mean, it's something we certainly want to get to as wide of people as we can in the time frame that we can. In terms of the sequencing of who gets it first and how many we can have a class, some of that depends on our current situation with COVID and other factors, but our goal is to get that to as many people in the organization as we can, yes.
Sure, I appreciate that. I know you talked about the percentages about the residents who are in Arlington Heights and the racial makeup. Does that, I don't think that takes into account the number of African-American people who work in Arlington Heights, nor the number who drive through. And I hope that that will be something that can be considered, that it's not that the makeup of the police department is not necessarily based on some kind of a formula from the people who live there. And I know, I just want to highlight that requirement because as I understand it, the employees who are in the police department do not necessarily have to live in Arlington Heights. They could come from other parts. So there's no requirement for that. Is that correct?
That is correct. And no, we certainly aren't looking at some kind of cap or anything on particular groups of people. We want to get as many different types of people as we can applying for our positions, and we use it as a benchmark to look at where we're at in terms of our population. And there's a lot of different ways to look at the population or the community that you serve, as you mentioned. And I think those are all viable ways of looking at it that ought to be part of the conversation from my perspective.
So just one last question. So if you're down 5 officers, so there is money in the budget, if you were to find the right candidate, as a person of color, that could be done, I would hope expeditiously.
Yeah, I mean, there's a testing process for police, and you have an eligibility list that is good for 2 years. And so, certainly, I think the next.
Randy, you're muted.
The next test is in 2021, correct, Chief?
You are correct.
And so,
it'll be and probably right around the holiday of 2021.
Well, I want to thank you. I've been coming, for almost a year, raising these questions. I appreciate the good report. I look forward to the dates for the community input that you put out, and to help make Arlington Heights, as I've said other times, a beacon of hope for being progressive and creative and a diverse and inclusive police department. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Borick. Next is Jen Acosta. Jen?
Hello, my name is Jennifer Acosta, and are you able to hear me?
We gotcha.
Okay, great. My name is Jennifer Acosta, and I am one of the authors of one of the petitions on this topic that you received. Our points were represented on the right side of your slide. And so I wanted to start out by thanking Chief Pecora for the presentation tonight. It really exceeded my expectations. I learned so much, and thank you so much for taking us through so much detail about what's already in place. Given the focus of our petition, you might not be surprised to learn that I have some questions about CALEA, the third-party auditing firm that you work with and get accredited with. So I have 2 questions on that, and then one about this duty to intervene that was added. So I was wondering if you anticipate any changes to the CALEA standards in response to the conversations that are happening currently on a national level in response to Floyd's death and related incidents. And also I was wondering if you would consider making the results of the audit, the most recent audit, as well as the upcoming one in 2021, available to the public, or a summary of those results. I think that, it sounds like we pacify in colors, we do very well on it. I think this would really instill a lot of confidence in our residents, our citizens, to see how well we're doing, and also position us as a leader in this space that other police departments, neighboring police departments may want to try to, match our level of strength on those areas.
Sure, let me answer your questions. Thank you for your comments. With respect to CALEA, I hope they take into consideration what has happened and how we can better move forward as a profession. Every day is an opportunity to learn, and if you don't use that mindset, then I think you've got your blinders on. I hope the commissioners, when they update their standards, they take a look at what happened, and they maybe make a duty to intervene something that's mandatory for a CALEA accredited agency. I'm sorry, your other questions were?
Would you consider making the results transparent, the results of the audit?
Sure, the 2017 is over 100 pages. It's a good read if you've got insomnia, and I'll be happy to put it up on the website.
That'd be great. And then my other question was about duty to intervene. I was wondering how that would show up in the training, and how, so it was great that you added it to the policy. I think that's phenomenal in response to public input, but how do you foresee that showing up in training and in day-to-day practices, so that the officers really embed that into their day-to-day behavior and mindsets?
So because I just rolled it out, we have a software program that manages our 200 general orders. And it went out to all staff as a reread and a reaffirmation. So it will require staff to open the document, read the update, and then acknowledge with an electronic signature that they read and understood the addition to both the rules of conduct and the response to resistance by reading the duty to intervene paragraph. And to reinforce the issue, it goes on the roll call board. And whether they're in patrol or detectives or traffic unit, community services, whenever the shifts muster, the supervisor who's conducting roll call will let everybody know that there's something new added to our directives, and here it is, and it's only a couple of sentences. So the supervisor will most likely read it and ask anybody if there's conversation that needs to be had, or if it's pretty self-understanding what their new obligation is, should they be confronted with something like what transpired in Minneapolis.
Great, thank you.
If I could add something, Mayor, related to this. You know, the village is part of another organization called the Intergovernmental Risk Management Association, and it's essentially an insurance pool of municipalities. They sent out a communication this week that their steering committee is redrafting its model use of force policy to be more explicit in terms of appropriate uses of force. And they're also providing training to all of the member agencies, including us, on related topics such as the benefits of body cameras, racial insensitivity, implicit bias, de-escalation, immediate accountability for misconduct, and the duty to intervene. And so, you know, what I think you're seeing in the industry, at least locally, is a sensitivity to these issues. And with that particular agency, and that's made up of representatives of each agency, you know, there could be an impact on the village's insurance rates, you know, if model policies aren't adopted. And so that's something, obviously, you know, aside from us wanting to do the right thing and it being a goal from the village board, there's getting to be a financial incentive for communities in our area to follow model policies again. So I think that, you know, the good news is I think that in our, at least in the Chicagoland area, there's a lot of voices being heard on a lot of different levels on this issue, and knowing that things are going to, you know, we need to rethink how we do this in the industry.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. Next is George Matto. Dr. Matto?
Can you hear me now?
We got you, George.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I just want to say that I was thrilled to see the presentation on the agenda, and I really kind of expected it, understanding how good our village government is at addressing issues, and certainly Chief Pecora, our new chief, and his previous statements. And it just affirms why I feel safe in Arlington Heights. Also, I'm glad that we have Mr. Carter on the Senior Citizens Commission. I know him he's from Evanston, and he's the only person that really conversed with me on the age-friendly thing in Evanston, so I'm glad he's on our Senior Citizens Commission. In a broader sense, though, I think that, you know, our great police force is giving us breathing space, so to speak. And I think that, especially since we're now designated an age-friendly community, that maybe we could include in the discussions on diversity in the police department, begin discussions on diversity in the entire community in the village. I know this is a nebulous topic, but as I say, right now, I think the police department is great. It's giving us time, and we should plan for the future. And I did suggest, you know, that we do what Geneva, Illinois did, have, in addition to the town hall on the police department, which is excellent, and I applaud that, perhaps a multidisciplinary task force on diversity in general in our village. And that would be my recommendation and comment, and thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Matto. Next is Rob Blumstein.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Gotcha.
Fantastic. First of all, I want to say thank you to the chief and all of you for the presentation. My question also concerns that CALIA accreditation that you discussed. If I'm remembering correctly, Chief, you mentioned that that accreditation costs $12,000. I don't know if that's per year or per accreditation cycle, but either way, I'm wondering, are there any benefits to that accreditation other than basically having something to point to say, see, we have this?
So the $12,000 was our initial investment, and it's $4,000 each year thereafter for the assessors to review our policies and for us to maintain best practices and receive the CLIA standards. Yes, it does do a lot for us. It holds us to that higher standard. We can say we're one of 800 police departments nationwide that subscribes to a higher standard. It's used to represent the police department when it comes time to court proceedings. Do you have best practice policies? And it makes us more defensible. And it holds us in a higher regard within our peers in the law enforcement arena.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Blumstein. And then we have Jim Bertucci. There you go, Jim. We got you now.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to speak to the CLIA accreditation. Back when we were first accredited, I was president of the Crime Stoppers of Arlington Heights organization and was also working with the police department and a couple other matters. And I was asked to appear in front of their panel. This is no rubber stamp. It was no rubber stamp. Trust me. We worked. I know Chief McCoy worked hard in his position at the time, and as a Crime Stoppers organization, we worked hard to put our information together. And I remember when I was standing in front of that board, they grilled me. So this is no rubber stamp, as Chief Pecora said. He could probably do the number, but this probably represents less than 5% of the police forces out there. So it is definitely an accreditation that Arlington Heights Police Department should be proud of. And I think Chief Pecora, the fact that him and his predecessor, Jerry Morning, were able to get that accreditation says a lot about what our police department is all about.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it. And next is Jerry Wasserman.
Hi there, do you hear me?
Gotcha.
Hi, thank you for the presentation tonight. It was wonderful. I learned a great deal. I have a question about CLIA 2. I know Jen asked the question, are the audit findings going to be made public? That was one of the questions I had. Secondly, you mentioned there's a public component to that audit. How do you go about getting public comment for the CLIA audit?
So as the previous speaker just mentioned, when the assessors come to the Village of Arlington Heights for their on-site assessment, we're required by CLIA standards to announce a date and time, location, telephone number where the assessors will be to take comments from the public. So the next opportunity for the public to comment on their interaction, whether positive or negative, with the Arlington Heights Police Department will be sometime next year.
Okay, my only question about that or concern is the public comfortable, approaching it in that way? And does it consider people that are maybe passing through town and were pulled over for racial profiling? I mean, my concern is racial profiling, and I'm just thinking, is that the best way to get people to report on racial profiling? And what's a way of finding out, how can we know how often it happens for people that maybe are passing through town that don't even live in the town? I know that's kind of a tough thing to come by, but I just wondered your thoughts on that.
Well, I don't have an answer for you on how to get a message to the masses and anybody that may happen to traverse our great community. We subscribe to the CALEA mandate and we make it a public notice, and we do our best to let people know that this is the opportunity, again, to comment on your interaction with the police department, whether negative or positive, and we can make it a learning experience, and the assessors will take the comments into due context.
Okay, good. I have a question about body cameras. Is that mandated in Arlington Heights?
Body cameras are not mandated right now by the police department general orders. We do have dash cams, and those are on all the patrol vehicles. When an officer makes a traffic stop, there's a camera in the windshield of the car, and the officer carries with them a transmitter that captures all the audio interaction, and the dash cam, or the camera on the windshield, captures the digital images. The winds, if you will, in the state of Illinois have thought about making it mandated, and maybe not mandated, leave it up to discretion. Maybe it's an unfunded mandate. Maybe it's going to come with money. My most recent conversation with our vendor who supplies our tasers, also supplies most of the nation's body cameras, it's going to put $262,000 into my budget to operate the body cameras. And it's not so much the cost of the camera, it's going to be the cost of the storage of all the data that's picked up by a camera running 24 hours a day.
Well, maybe they'll increase the budget for you guys to include that, if that does become legislation, right?
Well, let's see what the federal or state police reform bills look like. And if they mandate body worn cameras, then we'll certainly comply.
Okay. And I wanted to know the process about when a mental health professional would be called in to an incident, because I feel like a lot of these incidences that are happening across the country, a lot of these people are on drugs, or, I mean, you know, it so happens that we're finding that there could be some drugs in their system. It doesn't warrant them being killed, obviously, but, you know, there's drugs in their systems, or there's some mental health issues. If different people who are brought on the scene, if mental health professionals, people that are experts in drug therapy, if those people could be brought on the scene, maybe it would prevent some of these things from happening. What is your viewpoints on that? How often are what is the procedure for that?
So if we have a call, whether it's an on view or we're called to a scene, and we identify somebody that may be in a crisis, our training through CIT is to get the person help. And our first avenue of treatment is our partners in public safety, the fire department. And we call the fire department on a frequent basis for what we call a mental health evaluation. They're the closest trained professionals that we can access. And we stand by with the fire department to make sure the scene is secure while the fire department does a mental health evaluation. And then there's two avenues. One, it could be an involuntary admit if there's somebody there that wants to sign a petition, or two, the person will go willingly, acknowledging that they've got some issues, maybe they're off their medication, and the fire department will transport them to the closest hospital where they can re-engage or get help from a mental health provider.
Good. So you don't find that you have to use force in any way? I mean, you know, things run pretty smoothly that way. I mean, you don't feel like there's ever a time someone gets too out of hand, or is that something that is on a call by call basis? I mean, right? I don't know.
Well, never say never. There's certainly incidents where somebody's off their medication and they're out of control. And we have a policy that deals with applying force to somebody that's in a mental health episode. And again, we partner with the fire department, and they know how to restrain someone so they don't get hurt, and they transport them to the hospital where they're seen by a healthcare practitioner.
All right. And now one more question.
Ma'am, I'm going to have to move on because you're well over the 3-minute time limit. These are all great questions, but I would encourage you to contact the chief directly if you have an additional question that has not yet been answered. So thank you very much. Next is Elise Hackle.
Hi, thank you so much, first of all, to all of you for your time, especially tonight, but also for all of the input. So I'm wondering, what steps outside of this are you taking to continue to have conversations collect data and information from our community members to ensure that the needs of our community are being met.
Well, let me just speak on behalf of the village board. Myself and all members of the village board are available essentially 24/7 for personal conversations with our residents, and we'd be happy to listen to whatever your concerns are. Speaking for the board, I know they're very open to that. And you know, we continue. I pass along anything I receive to our village manager and our police chief in terms of community concerns. So anything else, Chief or Mr. Recklouse?
No, Chief, if you want to mention surveying we've done in the past, and I can talk about some of the stuff we're planning going forward.
Certainly, you know, the surveys that we conduct are triennial surveys, and we conduct one for the business community and one for the residents, and they're not anonymous surveys, and they're random, sent to random households and random businesses. And we've received 86 to 90% ratings from the community, and that's why you know, we have such a great police department and great community, because there's positive interaction. If somebody has an issue with how we operate, policemail@vah.com is a great way to reach me or any member of the staff here, and we'll address your concerns.
Yeah, and I was going to say too, you know, if for some reason someone is not comfortable coming to calling the police department, you know, part of my job as village manager is oversight of all the departments, including police. You always can reach the village manager's office to file a complaint or to make an inquiry. In addition to the surveying, as I mentioned earlier, we are going to be hosting a community meeting where we want to get everybody's input on these matters. But you know, so there are different ways to reach out. And, you know, if there's ever a problem with any of the services we provide, you know, including police, obviously, we want to hear from everybody, and so we can make sure we're doing the best job that we can.
Thank you. And one quick follow-up question. How or what steps are you taking to ensure that it's accessible to all community members, not just people that we're sending something to their house, but for people with disabilities, for people with mental health issues, for voices that may not regularly be heard or be able to be available per se at this time or have access to internet? How are we making sure that all their voices are taken into account?
My understanding is it's a mail out survey that we do that's sent a random sampling of households. Is that correct, Chief?
That is correct.
So it would go to you know the randomization process wouldn't discriminate. The other thing I would say is we do have different community partners that we work with, and we have a Citizens with Disabilities Commission that advocates on behalf of that population. And you know, we do hear from our partners on issues, you know, particular issues of need for different populations. And so that's another way that we can reach people in different populations.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Elise. And next is Erin Ellen.
Good evening, Mayor and Board. Thank you for letting me talk, and thank you so much for the presentation this evening. It's been really, really educational. Along with Jen, I'm one of the co-authors of one of the petitions that were out there, and the speed and thoroughness of your response is greatly, greatly appreciated. Just had a quick question. Is there any way to get insight to the number of claims of inappropriate response to resistance? And is there any insight you can give us on the investigation onto those claims when they arise?
One of the CLIA standards is that we do an analysis on use of force. Yep.
Chief, it looks like you're frozen. Did you answer the question? Okay.
I'm back. One of the CLIA standards requires that we do a use of force or response to resistance analysis annually, and that document encapsulates the 12 previous months, and it talks about what was applied, whether it was a physical control, whether it was a taser weapon, whether it was an impact weapon, etc., and was the policy followed, and was the use of force proportionate to the action. And to the best of my recollection, none of those applications have been determined to be excessive.
Erin, did you have anything else?
I think the second question was, so it's just CALEA that investigates those, or is there anything that Arlington Heights Police Department does, or community involvement, anything like that?
Sure. So I talked about the comprehensive report when there's a response to resistance. So the way it transpires is obviously the officer uses a level of force during an arrest. The officer notifies his or her immediate supervisor. The supervisor comes out to the scene, conducts an on-scene investigation, takes pictures of it if necessary, collects any evidence, and then the supervisor prepares a report, submits it to their commander. The commander signs off on it. The division deputy chief signs off on it, and it comes to my desk for a final review, and I sign off on it, and it goes to the administrative services deputy chief, who holds them for a year, and at the end of the 12-month period, conducts an analysis on all of our response to resistant incidents and determines whether they were appropriate, whether there was policy failure, and if we need to do any training if we identify that there's a pattern developing.
Thanks for the clarification.
Okay, thanks, Erin. I have no other hands up at this time for this agenda item. I do see Bill Slankard on, and Bill, I know you submitted an email in advance. I think that your question has already been answered, but we could read your email into the record if you'd like, or if you think it's already been answered, please let us know. Bill, there you are.
All right. No, I had asked about whether there was goals and requirements. This is the first I've heard that there are any. And where would one find those results on the website or at the village hall?
A number of them are included in an early draft form in the 2020 budget. They were presented as part of that process, and they're in the document. The final business plan document, is kind of an internal document. It's something we certainly could provide via FOIA request. The only caveat I'll say is because of the village hall closure and the COVID-19 pandemic, we're in the process of updating a lot of the milestones because we've been kind of working with an arm tied behind our back for the last couple of months because of the restrictions. But if you send me an email, I can be sure to get you that information.
I did look through the budget document. I didn't see anything, but it could just be that I missed it. So I will look.
Yeah, in the human resources section, there's kind of some of the earlier versions of this, and the final version of it was put together at the end of the year, and it's an internal document that I use to hold staff accountable for our projects and plans. It's not something that's approved by the village board. It's more of an internal planning document, but it's kind of what we use is to kind of dictate workflow throughout the year.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks, Bill. All right, I have no other hands then up for this agenda item. So I just wanted to thank the chief again for his great presentation and his answers to many of the questions that have been raised by our residents and throughout the community. And so, Chief, thank you again for your presentation tonight and all the great work that the men and women of our department do on our behalf on a daily basis. So thanks, Chief.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll pass on your kind words.
Appreciate it. And with that, we will move on then in the agenda to citizens to be heard. And Becky, you could just go with the other one that you've received today on a different topic. Becky,
sure, Mayor. Two questions came from resident Melissa Kayer. The first one is, how is equalized assessed value calculated? And the second question is, how can the individual property taxpayer keep part of their property tax for improvements to their own property?
And I know our finance director, Tom Keeney, is on board and ready to answer those questions. So Tom.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I'll just give a quick verbal answer to Melissa's question in regards to the equalized assessed value. First of all, the county comes up with an appraised value of each property with the help of township assessors. So this appraised value is then used to start the process. A classification percentage is applied to that appraised value. For instance, with residential properties, that it's a 10% classification factor. Once that's multiplied out, it equals the assessed valuation. That number then is multiplied by the state equalizer number that's determined by the Illinois Department of Revenue. And they do that to make sure that all properties throughout the country are assessed at 33 1/3%. Once that state equalizer is applied, any homeowners exemptions are subtracted from that number, and then you have the equalized assessed value. And I understand that just saying this verbally can be difficult to picture in your mind. So I would say to Ms. Kayer or anybody out there, if you're interested, I could send a spreadsheet that outlines this. If you email me at tkuehne@vah.com, and I'll be happy to send you the spreadsheet for that. In regards to Ms. Kayer's second question about individual property taxpayer keeping part of their property tax for improvements on their own property, honestly, I don't know of any way that could be done. I do know that with income taxes, for certain select property improvements, you might be able to get a credit on your income tax. However, when you do property improvements, that generally improves the property value, which you might have an increase in your property taxes in that case. But I do not know any way that you can use your property taxes for public or for your private improvements. So if you have any further questions, Ms. Kayer, please email me at the address I gave earlier. Thanks.
And thanks, Mr. Keeney. And I think another part to that second question is for us as village board members to keep property taxes as low as possible. So they're spending less on their property taxes and have more discretionary spending available to improve their homes. So we're doing the best we can in that regard. So are there any other citizens to be heard? Anyone in the audience who wants to address the board on an item not on the agenda? All right, seeing or hearing none, we will close public comment under citizens to be heard and move on to old business. And we have one other old business item to report out tonight. That's from the report of the committee of the whole meeting from June 8, 2020. And I call on Trustee Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd move tonight, as I did the night of June 8th, to accept the proposed changes to the village citizen participation plan, to the proposed substantial amendment to the 2019 annual action plan that allocates the CDBG-CV funds for public services, and 3, an amendment to the 2020 Village of Arlington Heights budget to include $164,062 in CDBG-CV revenue account and account 215-0000-41147-00 and CDBG-CV public services budgeted expenditures in account 215-402-522.41-08 to be approved.
Second.
A motion by Trustee Rosenberg, seconded by Trustee Canty. Any questions or comments from the board? Anything from the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Rosenberg?
Yes.
Trustee Canty?
Yes.
Trustee Baldino?
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz?
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta?
Yes.
Trustee Padovani?
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia?
Yes.
Trustee
Did you get it? I said yes.
Yes. Trustee Schwingbeck?
Yes.
President Hayes?
Yes. We move on then to the consent agenda. Are there any members of the board who wish to remove an item on the consent agenda? Seeing none, any members of the audience wish to remove an item on the consent agenda? Seeing none, any members of the board wish to vote no or pass on any item on the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
I'll move approval of the consent agenda.
Motion to approve by trustee LaBedz, seconded by trustee Rosenberg. Roll call.
Trustee LaBedz?
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg?
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck?
Yes.
Trustee Baldino?
Yes.
Trustee Canty?
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia?
Yes.
Trustee Padovani?
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta?
Yes.
President Hayes?
Yes. Well, we finally move on to new business tonight, and we thank everyone who's appearing for those agenda items for their patience. These were very important topics that we were discussing earlier, and so we appreciate your patience and indulgence. The first item tonight is the South Arlington Heights Road Tax Increment Financing District Redevelopment Plan. Mr. Recklouse?
I'm going to let Mr. Perkins take this one.
Thank you. Just a brief introduction, and then Bill will walk through a presentation. This really started back in 2017 when we held a meeting with the businesses and hotels along the South Arlington Heights Road corridor. And much of what they said to us at that time was that the corridor, lacked in redevelopment opportunities. It was not reflective of the high standards that Arlington Heights sets for itself. And so we began a study that resulted in the South Arlington Heights Road Corridor Study that was adopted in May of 2018 by the Village Board. And then subsequently in July of 2019, an overlay zoning district was created for part of the property. And then in the fall last year, we met with school districts 214 and 59 and the Arlington Heights Park District to discuss the possibility of creating a tax increment financing district. And then lastly, also in the fall, retain the consulting firm of Kane McKenna and Associates to conduct a phase 1 study and then ultimately the proposed redevelopment plan. And so at this point, I'll turn it over to Bill Enright to talk about the redevelopment plan.
Thank you, Charles. Mayor Hayes and members of the board, trustees, and the public. The redevelopment plan and project is for the southern portion of Arlington Heights Road from I-90 north to Seegers Road. So it's about a mile-long stretch, mostly on the east side of that thoroughfare as a gateway into the community. As Charles alluded to, in 2018, the Village Board approved a corridor plan for the South Arlington Heights Road corridor. And one of the objectives was to evaluate tax increment financing as a facilitator to stimulate development in this very important corridor. Conditions exist which really challenge this area for potential redevelopment. Thus, the RPA, the redevelopment project area on the whole, has not been subject to growth and development through investment by private enterprise and would not reasonably be anticipated to be developed without the adoption of this redevelopment plan and related ordinances. This
Bill,
is a map of the area.
Bill, if I could just interrupt, the PowerPoint's not showing up. I don't know whether it's showing up for everybody else.
I'm not seeing it.
I was just sending Randy a note.
Yeah, I screen shared it and it's showing up for me. I'm not sure why everybody else isn't getting it.
If you want to, don't share your screen, share the presentation. So if you click on share screen and then click on the PowerPoint presentation itself, it works a little bit better.
Yeah, that's actually what I did. Charles, do you want to try and share the PowerPoint? I'll try again here. No, I guess Charles has started it. Okay, Charles is able to bring it up. Okay. Great. Let me see if I can control it. I'm not able to control it, so we can move forward to the next slide. The boundaries are at the north, Seegers Road, at the south end, I-90. Most of the properties on the east side of Arlington Heights Road, the eastern boundary being Tawny Drive. There is one property at the southern end on the west side of Arlington Heights Road, the old Elk Grove Township Assessor's Office. When we originally looked at the area internally at staff level, we looked at the west side of Arlington Heights Road as well, adjacent to the boundary that's proposed, but determined that that area did not meet the criteria to be included in a TIF district. So we directed Kay McKenna and Associates, our consultant, to move forward with the area that you see here, which does qualify pursuant to state law. We can move. Just some aerial photos. This is the former Wellington site. These next few aerials will show the underutilization of property and the lack of investment over several years. This is the former Yanni's site at Algonquin and Arlington Heights Road, looking northward. This would be looking south at the southeast corner of Algonquin. There's several vacant buildings here that have been that way for a number of years. The Daily Herald building included in the far left is also vacant now. So we have a history here in this corridor of vacant properties and vacant lots as well. This would be at the northern end. It's a single-story office building at Seegers Road looking south, which is an older building that would be included as part of the TIF going southward. Just to give some context with existing TIFs, we have 3 TIF districts in the community, and the acreages there are listed. We have a total of 147 acres within existing TIF districts, which constitutes 1.4% of our total land area. Now, of that 147 acres, many of the acres, probably 30 or so, are actually street right-of-way, so it's not private property. This proposed TIF is approximately 65 acres, of which 15 acres are street right-of-way and 50 acres are private land. If this were to be approved, the village number of acres would be 212, which is about 2.1% of the village land area. The reason I bring this up is that the village has, in our opinion, been has minimized our use of this financing tool. It's one of the few, if not the only, economic development tools available, and the board has used it very minimally. There are communities that have TIFs that are 500 to 1,000 acres or larger, and we've been very targeted in our use of TIF districts in the community and minimize their impact. The public process started with the Joint Review Board that constitutes the taxing districts that are represented within this proposed TIF district. That includes School District 59 and School District 214, as well as the village, the Park District, Harper College, Cook County, and Elk Grove Township, also a public member as appointed by the Joint Review Board. The Joint Review Board met on May 5th, 2020 via Zoom webinar and voted in favor of the project 6-0 with 1 abstention from School District 59. The 6-0 vote means that the redevelopment plan and project and the resultant ordinances were recommended for approval, and the Joint Review Board determined that the area does meet the Conservation District qualifications as a TIF district. The Redevelopment Commission, which is the planning commission constituting as the Redevelopment Commission, held a public hearing via Zoom webinar on May 27th of 2020. And the Redevelopment Commission recommended unanimously 7-0 in favor of the redevelopment plan and project. And this was the opportunity for the public to speak at the public hearing. The public was also given the opportunity to speak at the Joint Review Board as well. Generally, the redevelopment plan and project goals are to reduce or eliminate adverse impacts described in the TIF report, to return underutilized property within the RPA, which was demonstrated in the report, but also in the aerials that I just went through, into productive use and to strengthen and enhance our village's tax base. Provide for high quality mixed use development within the area. That can include hotels, residential, could include restaurants, offices, medical uses, all sorts of mixed uses, similar to our downtown, which allows a mixture of all sorts of land uses in order to facilitate economic development, in addition to those related to affordable housing. which is a expenditure that can be assisted with TIF funding. And finally, accomplish redevelopment in a reasonable time period. TIF districts can last up to 23 years. The TIF plan does conform with the village's comprehensive plan for mixed-use development. The area is a minimum of 1.5 acres, well over that. And but for the requirement, the redevelopment would only be feasible with utilization of TIF district financing. There has not been any investment in this area other than in recent years, other than the hotel is on Arlington Heights Road has done some renovations, quite nice. But other than that, we've just seen a continued deterioration of properties and vacancies in this corridor for a number of years. That includes the former Wellington being torn down, as well as the former Yanni's at the corner. The qualifying factors is a conservation area under the TIF Act. And what a conservation area is, it's the pre-blight. It means you're close. If you don't do anything now, you're going to likely reach a blighted criteria. In order to be a conservation area, to determine if the TIF is qualified, at least 50% of the structures in the area have to be 35 years or older, and at least 3 of 13 qualifying factors have to be present and reasonably distributed. I'll quickly go through these. There are several factors. First of all, 59% of the 17 structures are 35 years or older, which is the overriding criteria to find a conservation area. And then 6 factors out of 13 were found present to a meaningful extent throughout the area. The first factor was equalized assessed value. The top line of this graph, you can see over 6 years, the EAV for the proposed TIF has basically been stagnant. It was 24.2 million in 2013. 2018 is 24.6 million. So it's been pretty flat. The village as a whole, which is the third line down, you can see it's gone from 2.4 billion to 2.89 billion. So there has been some uptick after the Great Recession in the village's EAV over the last several years, but we have not realized that in this particular TIF, which is another indicator of lack of development investment. Excessive vacancies, as I mentioned, Yanni's and Wellington. Also, 5 of the 7 buildings south of Algonquin Road are vacant. That includes a couple office buildings, the former Applebee's, the former Daily Herald. There are certain buildings, there's a building north of Algonquin Road, an office building, which has had high vacancy rates historically. And all these cause adverse conditions because you have properties that look in disrepair and empty parking lots and don't add to the corridor. It can end up in tax reductions because of vacancies. So it negatively impacts the tax base. There's been deterioration observed throughout most of these properties through building damage, deteriorating parking lots. So that's been prevalent throughout certain properties in this TIF, proposed TIF. Lack of community planning. The area really developed as most of suburbia developed in the 60s and 70s to a certain extent without a plan in place. And in many cases, you have all the different properties have their own entryways and accesses. So one thing we want to do is coordinate access to make it more efficient. There's a traffic signal proposed in the South Corridor plan along Arlington Heights Road to consolidate access and provide for enhanced access to properties. We also want to move the sidewalk back and have better pedestrian interconnections at the intersections. Sidewalks right up against the roadway, which is not a good place for it given the high volumes of traffic. Next. Inadequate utilities. A lot of this area did develop decades ago, and we have new ordinances by the MWRD as well as the village's standards. So the standards for on-site stormwater detention is quite a bit greater than it's been in the past, certainly years ago. So any new development here, there's going to be a need for greatly increased on-site stormwater detention. Obsolescence is generated by the mere fact that most of these buildings in the area are over 35 years or old, and we have this lagging EAV and vacancies. So, and what I just mentioned, inadequate on-site stormwater detention. So a lot of these sites are just past their time. Anybody driving by there, I think, can just see that visually. The TIF plan budget has a 23-year budget. These costs can increase line item by line item with inflation automatically. We did some estimates. These are rough estimates on what could be total assistance costs or public costs, and it shows a grand total of 86 million. Our consulting firm, Kane McKenna, who's here tonight to answer any detailed questions about the eligibility plan. What they did in addition to the budget and working with staff is they ran projections on how much increment might come from the TIF. So this budget would not exceed any expected increment over the next 23 years. Some of these items include, if we go back for a second, Charles, some of these items, the fourth item down does talk about rehabilitation of existing structures and residential construction costs as provided by the Act. The Act does allow for the village to get involved with helping assist in the cost of providing affordable housing. Of course, affordable housing is an important element of the board's goals. And I know you're all looking at possibly codifying that. And since this is in a TIF district, those requirements might be a little higher than the remainder of the village, but we can help financially with development to facilitate that important goal. In addition, the second one from the bottom talks about school tuition costs. If there are any new students in a TIF district that were not previously enrolled in the elementary or high school district, and it's a TIF development that is assisted with financing, then any new children would have to be covered, their costs, their tuition costs would have to be covered by the TIF district annually. There is a limit of 40% of the increment from the residential portion of that development that can be allocated, so it's a cap, but it does allow for a dollar for dollar reimbursement to the taxing districts for some of the costs incurred. Given the nature of the plan, we don't expect a lot of children to be generated. That's our experience with our downtown, which is mostly, rental and smaller condo units. So you don't get a lot of children in these types of redevelopments. Next. And then conclusion, the area is contiguous and greater than 1.5 acres, which is a requirement of the TIF statute. The proposed area does qualify as a conservation area. The conservation area factors are found in the RPA and present to a meaningful extent and throughout the area. The sound growth of the taxing districts, including the village and the school districts, has been impaired by the factors found in this present area. That's been illustrated by the stagnant EAV in the area and vacancies. All property in the area would substantially benefit by the proposed development project improvements, not just the area, the properties in the proposed TIF, but really the area around the TIF, I think would benefit as well. We found that in our downtown where the impacts were beyond just the downtown. And the area would not be subject to redevelopment without the investment of public funds, including increment. That would conclude the staff presentation. We're open for questions.
Are there any questions from the village board? Trustee Scaletta.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Enright, can you go to page, well, now that we're off of it, on page 21, I think it said that about $10 million was going to be set aside for children to go to school if they were in that area. What does that break down? I mean, how many children does that break down to?
Well, the per pupil student costs for the elementary and high school district is somewhere in the range of around $15,000 per student per year. I'm not quoting that. It's just my best estimate, but it's what I recall. So the $10 million isn't necessarily capped. We're required to reimburse the school districts per the formula as outlined in state statute. We believe the 10 million is a high number that'll cover it, but it is capped at 40% of the incremental revenue from a residential component of a development. But it could in theory exceed that. But as I said, the budget can increase with inflation every year. So even though you see 10 million now, it'll be higher with inflation every year for 23 years. It'll go up. So it'll actually be more money in the budget. Worst case scenario, we would have to amend the budget, but we certainly would have to comply with the statutory requirements.
Okay, with simple math of $15,000 per school year, I show that it would be about 55 students who go through 1st through 12th grade. So I just wanted to kind of get an idea of how quickly that $10 million number gets used up. And then the second question I had for you was, when they come up with the budget for the $86 million, where are they looking at the income side of that? I mean, what assumptions are they using? You know, because obviously, you know, I live on the south side of Arlington, and so I look at, you know, okay, we have Jewel and we have some other retail in the area, Mitsuwa, we have some of the hotels, but they have to be using something else to generate that kind of revenue, right?
Yes, I provided our consulting firm some estimated redevelopment scenarios for all the parcels in the TIF. It included approximately 650 to 750 residential units that could be a combination of senior housing and then market rate housing. In addition, I provided figures on estimated commercial property, a couple 100,000, I think it was maybe 300,000 square feet roughly. So we did give them estimates, and Kane McKenna ran projections based on current assessed values of new properties in those types of categories projected out over the 23-year time period. But they built in a phasing approach to it. It's not all going to happen day one. It's not going to be on the tax rolls day one. So it really starts kicking in, you know, 3 or 4 years down the road.
Okay. Well, thank you. I know that we did as a board spend some time talking about the South Arlington. And I think that the TIF is an excellent tool for us to use. This village has had great success with it in the past. And we've been very responsible with those TIF dollars. And so thank you to you, Charles, and the rest of your team, and obviously Kane McKenna for their work, because this document, you know, took some time and a lot of work to accomplish. So thank you for everything that you guys did. But I just wanted to understand some of those numbers and how you came up with them. So thank you.
Thanks, Trustee Scaletta. Any other questions from the board? Seeing none, we do, Trustee Rosenberg.
Bill, what's your projections based upon, you know, how many years out do you think before development would really start and, you know, generating any kind of revenues and added EAV to the tax polls and things like that? Well,
The good news is that we have 3 or 4 property owners within the TIF that own a preponderance of the redevelopment sites that are looking to develop as soon as possible. That's a huge hurdle to get past, because we've had other TIFs where it's been more difficult, because, you know, when you have the property owners willing and able to develop, you know, that can expedite things. On the other side, we have the pandemic, which is, you know, making things a little scary for everybody right now. We do have, as I said, 3 developers who have development plans for sites that they control or have under contract and want to get started with zoning hearings this year, and also potentially redevelopment agreements if TIF funds are sought. So we're very optimistic on that front, that we have active developers interested in getting started this year with their approvals. And then hopefully, you know, if the market gets better or, you know, has positive signs next year, things could move forward. But even on that optimistic scenario, it still takes, you know, 2 to 3 years to get property on the tax rolls, dependent upon how quickly the developer gets moving with construction and if they phase it or not. But we built that into some of our estimates.
So do you anticipate large dollars being needed for these initial developers, you know, from the standpoint of putting in infrastructure and things of that nature, that we would probably end up doing those bonds sooner than later? Or?
Well, it's potentially. We're currently doing the infrastructure largely for detention would be private cost. In terms of sewers and water, we are undertaking a consultant study to see if any of the sewer lines would have to be, we're satisfied the water will be fine, but if any of the sewer lines would have to be increased in capacity, that could be a combination of developer upfront costs or the village assistance as well. It could be pay as you go, where the developer upfronts the costs and they get the increment as it's generated over time. We've done a combination of pay as you go with developers, but we've also done some limited upfront bonding. We usually take a very conservative approach in our recommendations to the village board. And as I mentioned in the redevelopment commission hearing, in all our TIFs that we've had to this point, we've paid off every single bond that we've issued on time and never defaulted or never had to go to the general fund to pay that off.
The ComEd issue, is that on the initial property or on other properties down the road? Burial of lines and things?
Yeah, those are in the public right of way, so none of the private developers would have to incur any of those costs. The ComEd lines are on the west side of Arlington Heights Road. The TIF district boundary does include the full right of way, including the west side of Arlington Heights Road. I think that's something that we would explore initially with ComEd and discuss, and if it's feasible to start at least the planning process. But I think we'd want to wait a little bit to see how some of our development agreements shake out with developers and how our increment starts coming in, because I'm not sure we'd want to put the cart before the horse. That might be something we want to wait a few years to make sure we have the funding coming in for something like that.
All right, thank you. Thanks for all your hard work, and Charles too.
Any other questions from the board? Seeing none, we do have one individual from the audience, Keith Moons, who would like to address the board. Keith.
Good evening, all. Good evening.
Gotcha.
Okay, thank you. Comments and a couple of observations on the Kane McKenna report. First comment in the executive summary on page 3, the but-for requirement. I think that's a very subjective call to say that you would need to have a public finance TIF in order for this to develop. Especially there's a mountain of research out there that says that, you know, TIFs just do not deliver on promises. And if a parcel is developed, you know, it would have developed anyway without the TIF. So there's a lot of, I think, empirical research on that. I think downtown Arlington Heights is a pretty good example of that. I mean, we all feel, you know, that it would have developed anyway. Arlington Heights would have developed anyway without the TIFs, the very expensive TIFs. And it may have taken a little bit longer, but I think it would have been a lot more efficient. And basically what it says is that if the market isn't available or the market won't do it, then a TIF addition, it won't make the difference. So the market kind of has to do that on its own, and a TIF is just kind of a kicker to, you know, the developers. The one observation I had on the Kane McKenna report was on page 9, and I think Bill put that up there with table 4 with the EAV 2013 to 2018. The RPA was lagging the regular village. If you average that growth is about 0.5%. The village was at 3.6%. So you're right, it did lag the regular village. But if you remove, I think 2016 out of that, it's almost the same. I don't know what happened in the village to get an 18.5% increase in EAV, but it would be pretty close to the same. The other thing that it did end on a $24.7 million EAV in the RPA. And if you look on page 24 of the Kane McKenna study, it says that after 23 years, the EAV in that parcel alone will be between 85 and 100 million. So that's just an enormous increase on that parcel alone. That's about 11 or 12% increase over 23 years. And it's going to go 3 times faster than the village would grow. I think that's just wildly optimistic. And if they are really looking for that kind of an EAV increase, the schools are really going to get hurt. They're going to really withhold a lot of taxes, and they need the money they need now or would need to use right now. And I think when you talk about student increase, that's a net increase, the way I read it. So if you lose 10 and pick up 10, you're right back to zero on what you have to give back on the TIF. So it just, given the COVID where we are now, the idea that TIFs are very questionable, whether they help develop a property on its own, the retail uncertainty right now, some of these wildly optimistic projections here at 12 to 13% growth rate in the TIF district or the RPA. I would ask that we really consider this at a later date and try and consider maybe this at some other point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moons. Are there any other members of the audience who wish to address the board on this agenda item? Seeing none. Anything else from the staff? We don't need a motion at this point. We've got 3 ordinances to approve under legal. And so we can wait until we get to that. Is that right, Randy?
Correct.
Okay. Well, we'll get to those in just a second, but Bill and Charles, thank you so much for your hard work on this. I know you spent many, many hours getting this ready to go for this evening. And so nice job. So we'll move on then into new business, and we've got 2 other items. The first is Shea Hotel, the property located at 519 West Algonquin Road, a request for sign variation. And Mr. Casares, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
We got you.
Okay, great.
Okay. We've obviously got your request, and Mr. Casares, do you have anything to add at this point?
No, I do not.
Okay. Charles, you want to make a short, emphasizing the word short, presentation on this?
Yes, very quickly. Mr. Casares is seeking 2 variations, one for placement of the sign to be 12 feet from Algonquin Road instead of the required 15 feet. And that is to use the existing foundation of their existing sign. The second is for the height of the sign. So the current sign is 16 foot 6 inches tall, as illustrated here. The proposed sign will have an electronic message board in the middle underneath the hotel name, and then obviously the hotel name here. This panel on the left will change color. It won't flash or flutter or anything, but periodically, maybe once or twice a day, that could change color. The total of those 3 areas is still less than the required 80 square feet of signable area. So the variation they are seeking is because this is an electronic message board sign, and when the board approved the code changes in 2017 to allow electronic message board signs along this corridor, the height limit of 10 feet was set for electronic message board signs. So they are seeking that variation. Staff had suggested maintaining that 10 feet, and the Design Commission recommended approval of what you see before you.
And I understand that was unanimous. Is that right, Charles?
That is correct, yes.
All right, any questions from the board? Trustee Scaletta.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Casares, I think that your sign looks great. The building is coming along very nice, and I think that the sign is going to be beneficial to you getting the exposure that you need along that very busy road, and also with the amount of trees that are in the parkway and in the surrounding area. I'm ready to make a motion at the appropriate time, Mayor.
Why don't you go ahead, John?
I would move to concur with the Plan Commission's recommendation.
Second.
I'm sorry. I would move to concur with the Design Commission's recommendation.
Second.
All right, motion by Trustee Scaletta, second by Trustee Canty. Any further questions or comments from the board? Anything from the audience on this agenda item? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Scaletta,
Yes.
Trustee Canty,
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia,
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg,
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck,
Yes.
Trustee Baldino,
Yes.
Trustee Padovani,
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. Well, congratulations, Mr. Saris. Can you give us an update on your construction real quick and when you expect to have completion?
Yes, we are currently working on the exterior of the building with the whole COVID-19 epidemic happening. It probably is going to lead to a 6 to 8 month delay. So we should be opening at around this time next year.
Well, we're hoping for no further delays, and we're looking forward to the opening.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Well, congratulations. Good luck.
Thank you.
And we have one other agenda item under new business, and that's the request for sign variations at the Amazon facility located at 1455 West Shore Drive. Is the petitioner present?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, Asher Cousin. Do you have anything to add, Mr. Cousin?
No, I know the design commission had recommended some more aesthetically appealing posts than what's currently there with Nokia. I think that was the only comment they had under the recommendation. But otherwise, we're excited to get started with construction. We just pulled our building permit this week or last, and yeah, we should be opened up in September.
All right, thank you. Mr. Perkins?
Yes, I'm having trouble pulling up the presentation, but this is a 215,000 square foot building. They are seeking a couple of variations for directional signs and a couple of wall sign variations. It is a large facade. So the main wall sign variations are on exterior walls that would not normally be allowed a sign, but are necessary to advertise and promote the various entrances and location of the building for not only the deliveries, but also there's an Amazon hub facility where customers can do returns or do some limited pickup themselves. There are a number of directional ground signs directing both customers, their employees, and deliveries. And so both staff and the design commission recommended approval of these changes.
Thanks, Charles. Any questions or comments from the board? Trustee LaBedz.
Thank you, Mayor Hayes. First of all, I want to say I'm in support of the signs, the variations. They certainly are in keeping with Amazon's brand. So they look good. I really have a question, since one of the signs has to do with the drop off and pickup area for customers. It's not so much a question about the sign, but I think that is something that would be of interest to a lot of residents who get package deliveries from Amazon. And I was just curious, I don't know if you would know this, what kind of time frame will that be open to the public? I mean, is it like, you know, Monday through Saturday or that sort of thing? I just think that would be something of interest. I don't know if Mr. Cousin, if you know that, or Charles, or if it's too soon to know.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't realize I was unmuted. Yeah, it's a 24-hour facility. So if you have a return, you can get into the building, and then there's a secured entry to enter into the actual like business side of it, if you would. So the hub area is always open to the public.
So, so like if I come at 3 o'clock in the morning because I can't sleep and I want to return something, I can do it?
As long as you have a code to operate the hub machine.
Oh, okay. So it's all, I've not been to one. So the hub machine is something that is, there's not specifically people there. It's kind of more like postal boxes in the post office.
Yes, and you enter in a code that the website gives you and you process a return or opt to pick up. And then our associates will place the package in the hub at whatever bin. And when you enter in your code, that door will pop open. so you can grab your package. And then if you have a return, it's the opposite. You get a code, the door opens up, you put your package in there and close it, and then our associates will grab it out of there and process your return.
Thank you for that explanation. I appreciate it. I think there'll be a lot of people who will appreciate having that
We hope so.
convenience. Yeah. And that was all I had. Thank you.
All right. Trustee Rosenberg.
Quick question, and I'll make the motion. Just curious when you plan on opening officially, Mr. Cousin?
First half of September, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see if I can get the paperwork in front of me.
I just concur with the Design Commission recommendation.
Yeah, I would just move to concur with the Design Commission recommendation to approve the sign variations on Design Commission number 20-033.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Rosenberg, second by Trustee LaBedz. Any further questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, anything from the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Rosenberg,
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia,
Yes.
Trustee Padovani,
Yes.
Trustee Canty,
Yes.
Trustee Baldino,
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta,
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck,
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. Well, congratulations, Mr. Cousin, and we look forward to the opening. Welcome to Arlington Heights. We're very happy to have you.
Thank you. I've enjoyed working here so far, and look forward to working with you guys some more. Have a great evening.
Thank you. And next we'll move on to legal, and we do have the three ordinances related to the TIF. And so could I get a volunteer for legal A? Trustee Scaletta.
Thank you, Mayor. I would move now to develop an ordinance of the Village of Arlington Heights, Cook County, Illinois, approving a tax increment redevelopment plan and redevelopment project for South Arlington Heights Road corridor.
Good.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Scaletta, seconded by Trustee Padovani. Any further questions or comments from the board or the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Scaletta,
Yes.
Trustee Padovani,
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck,
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg,
Yes.
Trustee Baldino,
Yes.
Trustee Canty,
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia,
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. How about a volunteer for the next one? Trustee Baldino.
Thank you, Mayor. I would move to adopt an ordinance of the Village of Arlington Heights, Cook County, Illinois, designating the South Arlington Heights Road corridor as a redevelopment project area pursuant to the Real Property Tax Increment Allocation Redevelopment Project Act.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Baldino, second by Trustee Rosenberg. Any questions or comments from the board or the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Baldino,
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg,
Yes.
Trustee Canty,
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta,
Yes.
Trustee Padovani,
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia,
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck,
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. And how about for the last one? Trustee Tinaglia.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to move to adopt an ordinance of the Village of Arlington Heights, Cook County, Illinois, adopting tax increment allocation financing for the South Arlington Heights Road corridor.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Tinaglia, second by Trustee Schwingbeck. Any questions or comments from the board or the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Tinaglia,
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck,
Yes.
Trustee Padovani,
Yes.
Trustee Canty,
Yes.
Trustee Baldino,
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta,
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg,
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. Well, thank you. We move on then to the report of the village manager. Mr. Reckloss, anything further?
Nothing further.
All right. And under petitions and communications, anything from the board? Seeing none. Well, it's been a long evening, but a very productive evening. We thank you all for your participation and enjoy Arlington al fresco. Hopefully the weather, well, it's going to be a little warmer in the next couple of days. It's a little cool this weekend, but we had a lot of smiling faces out at Arlington al fresco. So thank you all for your participation in that. If nothing further, then I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
By Trustee Scaletta, seconded by Trustee Padovani. Roll call.
The first was Trustee Scaletta, was that correct?
Yep, right.
Trustee Scaletta,
Yes.
Trustee Padovani,
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg,
Yes.
Trustee Canty,
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia,
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck,
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
Trustee Baldino,
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. Thank you all again for joining us and have a good rest of the evening.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Aye.
All right, everybody.